Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. I was half tempted to start this with just like, hello darkness, my old friend. It's Tottenham Hotspur right now. It's just an absolute mess. Do you know what? The day before the game, I had a Friday off. Nothing major happened for a change. And it was glorious. It was such a nice day. It was a way pre-planned thing. It was a belated birthday kind of day for my wife. Ate at lunch at the Savoy. It was very nice. Virgin experience still. £35 each. So it wasn't even fancy. It was a really good deal. But it was just an incredible day. Really lovely. Didn't think about Tottenham once other than retweeting Guesty's transcript from the press conference. I thought, I was quite chilled, relaxed going into Saturday's match. And you know what? I even made the mistake of saying to someone, I think Spurs actually, today will be fine. I'm more worried about the week to come. And Spurs just went, oh, Alistair did a prediction. Let's just take that and throw it in the bin. It just feels like a club right now where just all control has been lost in so many different aspects. Yeah, I mean, Spurs players lost control of yet another match from being in front. Christian Stellini seemed to kind of lose control towards the end of just kind of chaotic tactics, confused players all over the place. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The fans lost control of their patience. We saw that as well. Very frustrated fans. Obviously, both Davinson Sanchez. Also, Pedro Porro. We'll talk about kind of what's happened with him as well. As the chants continue for his exit, so I think Chairman Daniel Levy, the chairman, the man where the buck stops really with, I feel like he's losing control of the club's direction. And do you know what? I feel he's kind of losing a little bit of control over his search for the next manager because of the other chants that we heard in the game. Because right now, the fans, with every passing debacle, are just singing for one man. And that puts a big old kind of... it skews the manager search quite a lot. And again, another thing we'll talk about, all of that, each individual element of that we're going to talk about over the course of this. So, apologies if you're really not up for talking about Tottenham or listening about Tottenham anymore. Although... some very nice people on the walk back to the train. I was in a real rush to get back to the train because I had one going, I think it was 7:10. And some very nice people trying to stop and say nice things like, videos are a little bit like therapy and stuff like that. And I appreciate that because it's kind of what they are for me as well. I find it, you've probably heard me saying before, very cathartic to talk through things and get it out of my system. So I'm glad that for some people it helps them as well. But yeah, this was another game in which we were treated to Spurs dropping back and back and back for no real apparent reason. It's just been like the default setting, doesn't it? It's like on Twitter where it currently defaults to that. Is it for you? I can't remember what it is, but that's kind of Spurs just... Every time you turn them on, their default setting is sit back and bring pain. And it just means the pattern of the matches is just so utterly predictable right now. Start with a little bit of enthusiasm, play, start brightly, maybe even score a goal. But then fail to add to that goal. And then slowly back, drop further back down that pitch, invite the pressure, maybe an opposition goal or two. And then, Spurs... actually show something. They try and fight back, show a little bit of spirit and character. Maybe they'll get a point, maybe they'll get 3. It depends on really the quality of opposition they're playing against. But it's so utterly predictable. We just know how every match pretty much is going to go right now. It's boring. It is. It's so boring right now. And obviously, you guys are paying your money. You're going to watch these matches. Fair play to you. I'm not having to pay for that privilege. It's not really a privilege right now, is it? But I'm having to write constantly about very similar themes, and trying to find different little strands to them is taxing. Like I say, Friday was just the loveliest day where I didn't have to think about Spurs. I'd kind of had been on a bit of a run. I think technically, if you include the days I'm doing videos as well, because I often do these on my days off, like today, I think I was about 10 days in a row on writing about Spurs or talking about Spurs. They're draining. They are so draining. I don't know why I'm telling you. You know how draining they are. But wow, I got to that Friday. I was just like, it was just a kind of a time to actually reset, or try to, until the next day happened. But yeah, their sitting back right now is as predictable as their ability to refuse a gift from anyone. Spurs are that person who you try and give something to, and they're like, no, it's all right, you keep it. You're like, no, have it. And I'm, no. Like, before the game, Villa absolutely smashed Newcastle 3-0, and you're thinking, okay, the door has opened. Come on, Spurs, take the opportunity. And yet again, I think it might be maybe the third or fourth occasion this season where they've had a chance to really push back, either third or fourth, and they've just gone, no, you're right, we're quite comfortable where we are, not really achieving anything. And so Christian Stellini added his name on Saturday to the long list of managers and players that have all gone, I don't know why they sit back. Scooby-Doo, I don't know. It's just, that's such an unfortunate way to go, especially with that meme where it's the Scooby-Doo and they take off the head of the villain who looks like Stellini, and underneath it's Conte going, ha. I don't know if I agree to that completely, but there's definitely, he's a man schooled in the way of Antonio Conte, so there's going to be a lot of that. And I think for the press conference I was away from, he took quite an offence to someone describing Conte as a defensive manager, taking offence at defence. Yeah, he was not happy. So for once, it wasn't me getting told from the press conference, which was quite nice. But yeah, what he did say about the sitting back, he said, the only question mark against their efforts the players need to have is don't give 2 games in one. This is his club interview. Play only one. When we score, again, we drop too much. We allowed the opponent to score 2 goals, not 1, and to recover that is very difficult. We did because we gave everything on the pitch and we had the opportunity to win with Richarlison. And he added on the team sitting back, it's the mindset. The mindset has to change absolutely because it was not our intention. We need to go strong. When we scored the first goal, immediately we dropped back. We have to keep the ball, not waste it, and play strong. This is the only thing that's important to analyse because today we played 2 different games. The game was well prepared, we played good, and after the goal it changed and we don't have to do it. So I pushed a little bit further in the press conference. I'd seen those quotes. And honestly, Stellini in that press conference was the most dejected I've ever seen him. I'd almost go as far to say he was like a defeated man. Well, he was technically a defeated man because his team had just lost, but he looked like a man who just kind of was like, oh, what am I supposed to do here? Which is never a good sign. He wasn't kind of bullish or anything like that. He looked genuinely quite just fed up with everything. I think that's eventually the look that everyone that seems to come into contact with Tottenham Hotspur has. So I pushed a little bit further on that kind of aspect of things. And he said, we played 2 different games. We played a good game until we scored and after we conceded the second goal. But what is in the middle is not the mindset we have to use because we started the game well. When we scored, we dropped. We dropped again. We have to change this type of mindset. We have said many times that we need to continue to go strong and try to keep the ball in their half of the pitch. We did this only when we were 2-1 down. It's a habit we have. It's not the first time. It's a long time that we do this, but we have to be perfect in the defensive situation. Today we were not so perfect because we allowed them to score with 2 mistakes. This is a problem. It's not a tactical problem. It's an individual problem, a mistake. Big words there because technically he's not going as far as Conte, but he is saying, not me, Gov, it's the players. It's not my tactical kind of setup. It's not the way we've prepared them. They've gone out there and done that. Which, whether he's right or wrong, I do think he's probably right to a certain degree. And to a degree. But I also think, there's aspects that the way the team has been set up, I think over the years that has led to this. to try and say it's nothing to do with coaching. I know, you've heard me say this before. There's so many managers and players. We've heard Kane talk about it. We've heard Lloris talking about it in the past as well, about how the players just suddenly naturally sit back and it's not what they want to do. But at a point, you have to look at the coaching. I think you do, because I guess when you've had 3 managers in a row, 4 if you want to say with Stellini, with a preference for a style that demands, it's more of a compact style, isn't it? A compact system, which calls for you to sit back and then suddenly, kind of like a snake, kind of uncoil and attack and like a counter-attack. I think if you're doing that, it drills the mentality into the players that they should naturally sit back and hope for an opening. I have no doubt that they're not actually being told to do that, to sit back. But in such a compact system, I think the natural tendency might be just to retreat into what you kind of think is a safe space almost. The safety of this compactness. Rather than taking risks, I suppose, and playing more openly. Because I'm trying to remember whether it happened under Poch, the sitting back. It's difficult because you're going to confuse it. Where there were certain games where at the end of a match, sometimes Spurs would fall a little bit deeper and you'd be like, no, why are you inviting this pressure on yourself? But I wouldn't say it was something they did from the early stages of the game. And I would say in the last 4 years, probably post-Pochettino era, it's definitely been something that can happen earlier in matches. And I think it has to be that the system, while not calling for those players to do it, is drilling it into their mind that they, if in doubt, sit back. I think that's what it is. I've been going back and forth over it for so long, so many years now as well. And I think that's what it is. I do think it's the natural, like I say, natural default option right now. And it's rubbish to watch. It's the worst style of football ever when they're doing that. And even Gary O'Neill, Bournemouth boss, said afterwards, we largely dominated the ball. Spurs' main threat was just the counter-attack. That's what we all keep saying. We're watching a team that even at home is playing like the visiting team. Even with the bright start, I actually felt in the first 4 or 5 minutes that Bournemouth had a lot of the ball and pushing Spurs back. It was only a little bit after that, maybe the 5 minutes after, that Spurs started to sweep up the pitch a bit. And obviously Sonny scored again. It's not great. And the irony is actually towards the end of the match, Stellini just abandoned all of the compactness. It took us a while to work out what the formation was, because the thing about formations, it's difficult to explain. I suppose when you're watching on TV, you can't always see. But formations obviously they look different in different transitions. So obviously without the ball and with the ball, they'll look very different sometimes. So you have to kind of watch both aspects until you can actually work out what the formation is meant to be. And we kind of realised it was a 4-2-4, but it was almost like a 4-1-1-4, because Stellini had chosen to put his club's all-time top goal scorer in Harry Kane into midfield, just in front of Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. So that you had a front four then of Sonny, Richarlison, Danjuma and Kulusevski. It was like, what? I kind of get the idea of putting, as mad as it sounds, because he's the man most likely to score a goal, he's also the only player, unless you put Kulusevski there, that's maybe the only other way, capable of getting the ball, threading it through to the others and actually using it properly, which is a damning indictment of Spurs' squad. Absolutely is a damning indictment, and our many calls for the club to bring a creative midfielder in. But yeah, it was kind of, I guess it was eruption, and this is what Stellini said. I think it was George Sessions from PA just asked him, like, essentially, it was so funny, the question. I don't think he meant it sound like that, but it was essentially, oh, what was that? What were you doing? I think he was actually genuinely trying to figure out exactly what the tactics were, and he said, in that moment, we used Harry in the midfield line. We dropped Harry to have more of the ball and the possibility to play, and we used 4 players to try to attack. That was the formation. We had all the quality we can have to try to score. That was the intention. And look, Stellini may well argue, hey, Richarlison scores an unmarked header from about 6 yards out from Perisic's corner. He's a tactical genius. His tactics completely worked, and I doubt Bournemouth then go up and score at the other end, because Spurs, you'd imagine Spurs probably then bring on Tanganga and go back to a more kind of compact system, or maybe Pape Matar comes on. But yeah, it's just incredible the fine line sometimes in football as well. Obviously, the change in tactics brought the Danjuma goal as well, which we'll talk about. So, yeah, it was a mad formation. It caused plenty of confusion kind of for both sides. For Spurs, there were players running into each other's space. They weren't entirely sure where to go. It was very chaotic. But then it kind of worked against them as well, because at the end, obviously, it left them naturally stuck up the pitch. And then when Solanke and Atara both ran up the other pitch, they were very much kind of, I guess they were still outnumbered. I think when I look back at it, there were 3 back, maybe 4. But still, yeah, it was a mess. And I looked at the stats. Spurs had 24 shots on goal. Bournemouth had 9. But Spurs managed only 8 on target, and Bournemouth had 6. So it kind of shows efficiency-wise, Bournemouth was so much better, obviously. And what I was just kind of crossed my mind as I was actually leaving the ground, I was thinking about this. It was another team in the relegation battle that Spurs have struggled against. And recently, in just over 2 months, they've lost to Bournemouth, Leicester City and Wolves, and they've drawn against Southampton and Everton. It's mad. Absolutely mad that they aren't taking advantage of these fixtures. I said this in the past. I looked at the fixture running and you kind of thought, okay, there's a big chance to get momentum ahead of that tough week. They absolutely did it at home until yesterday, but they just threw away so many gifts, like I say. I don't know why something went really posh there. And actually, it was quite interesting. All the talk about last week against Brighton about Stellini, I respect all of the other managers. I respect them all. I'm just Christian Stellini. I've only been in this job like a couple of weeks. He went straight off down the tunnel after the final whistle and didn't shake hands with Gary O'Neill or his staff at all. And actually, Gary O'Neill did a BBC interview afterwards. He said, I think that when we were on the wrong end of the result at our place, I shook the opposition manager's hand, so I was disappointed with them today. I thought to go straight down the tunnel and not shake hands was poor on their part, but it is what it is. What I would say is, to Stellini's credit, I think he realised he'd made a mistake. And from what I understand, he was standing there at the side of that BBC interview waiting for Gary O'Neill to shake his hand and apologise for not doing it in the first place. So, fair play for doing that, but I guess, I don't know, I was about to say maybe he's an inexperienced manager, he's not used to doing that, but the assistants and the rest of the coaching staff will shake hands as well. So, yeah, it was a little bit naughty. And I guess coming after the De Zerbi stuff, where obviously we kind of felt he was a bit hard done by, this wasn't a great look, but hey, he immediately tried to make up for it as well. But as for Stellini, this interim tenure so far has it's been really unconvincing. There's no getting away from it. He hasn't covered himself in glory. Tactically, he hasn't really been far removed from Conte. Hasn't really got more out of the players. You could maybe argue that he's got more out of Son. But I think if you're going to give him anything in defence, like Conte, he's been absolutely hammered by the amount of injuries Spurs have had. And certainly clustered in certain positions, because I keep hearing people say, switch to the back four, you've got to switch to the back four. And that's actually the one thing that I can't really level as a criticism at him, because, I mean, he did it for a spell yesterday, but the players aren't there for it. I think if Emerson and Ben Davies were back, absolutely fine. I think you could very much level that against him. Why are you not swapping? Right now, even Perisic is not a fullback. He's not at all. Pedro Porro could do it, but it's a little bit of a push, but he could do it. The only way you could have done it previously maybe was having Longley there as like an auxiliary kind of left back. But yeah, I get the back four thing. He can't do it. And I keep seeing people, I even had someone telling me today, like, who cares about the injuries? Just play the back four. I was like, oh no, I guess the only way you could do it, I suppose, is bringing up a youth player from the academy. And that's a hell of a big thing to put them into, a situation when, as we're going to talk about, the atmosphere is so toxic right now. I wouldn't want to throw a kid into that whatsoever. And of course, he got another injury yesterday. Clement Longley, he kind of went in for a tackle near the halfway line, and as he went to go in, you could see him pull up. It looked like a muscle injury, whether it's a hamstring, I don't know. It didn't look good. You'd hope maybe it was a precautionary thing. He thought, I'm going to come off before I make this worse. That's the only thing I can cling on to. But, it didn't look good. And as soon as he went off, Spurs lost a lot of the balance there. You're losing one of their only few left-footed kind of defenders right now, centre-backs. And he also lost his ability to pick out a really nice pass. The pass he did for the opening goal to Perisic down the left was beautiful. It's right into Perisic's path. And they lost that. And obviously, we know that Davinson Sanchez came on, and then there's more to talk about that. But I think injury-wise, for me, like a sore thumb, the one sticking out is Rodrigo Bentancur. Is one of these kind of ones you really realise just how important he was. I think we knew at the time, to be fair, but even more so now, you realise what a big loss he's been, because he was able to constantly bring attacking movement, aggression, and the goals. He was scoring important goals at Bournemouth. He scored late on at Bournemouth as well. He set the tempo, I felt, for Spurs. He didn't allow them to rest too long in this sitting back thing. And without him, look, Højbjerg and Skip, they've both got their qualities, and they can occasionally offer something attacking, but it's not consistent enough. So you end up with them almost sitting like two patrolling anchormen in the middle, not like Ron Burgundy or anything, but, anchormen at the back there. And then it means that the front three are very disassociated with the rest of the team. So you've essentially got three players up front who are trying to create just little individual moments of magic rather than a team. I mean, I was watching a bit of the West Ham Arsenal game just before I started to do this, and some of the patterns of play that Arsenal are playing, like there was little step overs, knowing that the man's behind you. But Spurs aren't able to do that. Their attacking movement on the whole is so rigid and predictable, and it's because very much they're going to get the ball to those front three and hope they do something with it. And it's just not a way to win football matches. It's so plan A, isn't it? Without any plan Bs or C or anything. And it's. I think Bentancur being taken out of that scenario in the middle is a massive, massive, massive loss for them. And like I say, it's difficult to see how Stellini tactically can fix it right now with the players that he's got available, because like I say, those players that are still there, there's such a limited amount of tactical options you can use them for. If anything, kind of really could have done with the likes of the Ben Davies, even Ryan Sessegnon and Emerson being available, just because they're able to play in differing positions. And I think that's what Spurs have lost. They've been kind of stuck with almost players that don't quite fit any other system than the one they're using. So while I understand the frustration and I understand the calls for this and that and whatever, I would give Stellini that he is currently hampered by those injuries. It's not to say that he's doing everything else right. Certainly not. But yeah, I do think he's hampered by that massively. But yeah, so not a great day for Stellini. But he was not alone. It was a very difficult day for Davinson Sanchez and also Pedro Porro. Look, I want to preface this by making it very clear that I understand 100% that the Tottenham fans have absolutely had enough, many of them right now. They've been on the edge all season. The frustrations have been bubbling away under the surface about the owners, about Daniel Levy, about a lot of decisions being taken at the football club right now. Look, you go all the way back to the start of the season. Second home match was Wolves, August. We're talking about August at the start of the season, and there were boos at half time. This has been there from the very start. And they would become, the half-time boos would become so frequent that, we as reporters in the press box would be like, okay, here come the boos, here come the boos. And they were like, when Spurs were drawing, didn't have to be behind. They could be level, and we knew the boos were coming because just the fans are so fed up this season. And, I understand 100% they're paying some of the highest ticket prices, not only in the Premier League, but in Europe for the football they're watching or being served up. Not least the season ticket holders. I know they froze the season ticket prices for the general season or the main season tickets, but I think the premium tickets went up. Someone told me 6% maybe. So, those are big money people are paying as well. And they're paying a lot of money to watch a club that they probably feel, and I think they're right, and certainly at some aspects, doesn't always make decisions with their best interest at heart. And also, on top of that, watching football over the past 4 years, it's been very difficult to enjoy. Let's be honest. It really is. Like you would have heard me say last week about watching Brighton and De Zerbi's football there was a part of me that thought, not that I wanted to go and cover Brighton or anything, but I did think, wouldn't it be lovely to cover that kind of football at Spurs week in, week out? Be able to purr about the kind of football you're watching and write these kind of long, flowery sentences about beautiful football instead of going, yeah, they lumped it up to Kane and Son and they did something amazing with it every single week. So I get it. I get that they're so frustrated. And, 61,639 of them. Well, obviously some of those are Bournemouth fans. But, they made the effort to turn up again on a Saturday. So with all of that in mind, I absolutely do feel that they have the right to voice their opinion at the team. That's my thinking, at the team. Look, my feelings. Anyone that's watched these or reads my stuff knows my opinions on booing individuals. I don't think it does any good. I think that's the biggest problem with it. I 100% agree that if you pay your money, I think you have a right to voice your opinion. But I think it's counterproductive. I think that's my main issue with it, is that when you're doing it, I get it is born from frustration. I get it just kind of comes out of you. And like I've said this before, when sometimes you can just hear groans naturally and everyone's emitting it at the same time. So we ended up with this big, loud groan at times. So it is a natural expelling of air. But to purposefully boo, it's like, I'm trying to think of what maybe in that moment they're not thinking. Maybe they're not thinking about whether there's any positive to it. They are just wanting to get their feelings heard. But it can't do any good. The player feels worse. The player gets even more nervous and is only going to make more of the mistakes that that they were making before that. It affects the rest of the players. Absolutely does. It just creates it's just an awful atmosphere. So while I understand the place it comes from, I just struggle to understand what the benefits are. And it was so uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable. And the problem with it is, if there's any little green kind of shoots that you want to see grow and flourish, they're just going to die instantly within that atmosphere. And I'm not saying that, again, it's very difficult because when you talk about this, people kind of think like, you're kind of swerving away from the real issues and things like that. Not at all. Not at all. You will hear me constantly talk about Daniel Levy and ENIC and the decisions that are made by the club and my bewilderment about a lot of the things they do. And that, I understand, is where the frustration comes from. A lot of it. And I think there's also a degree of maybe this player or that player they feel has been there for too many years and shouldn't be still in the team or being picked or whatever. But I'm sorry, I just don't see where it helps anyone. It really doesn't. That 51st minute. Oh my goodness. So back to kind of, just in case anyone missed this and exactly what happened. So Clement Longley went off. Davinson Sanchez came on. Christian, we actually thought maybe Tanganga would come on and he'd go on the left. But what he did instead was he brought Davinson Sanchez on. Christian Romero switched to the left, which I don't think we've seen before, actually. And Sanchez went across to the right. Look, my feelings on Sanchez haven't really changed too much over the last few years, in that I think he's a player that gives his all. And I think that was a sad aspect of what happened yesterday. I don't think you can ever fault him for lacking in effort. I think he always tries to give everything. But absolutely, mistakes have littered his game in recent years. They really have. That first season was so good. We were talking about it as we were waiting for Stellini and Gary O'Neill to come out for their press conferences yesterday. A lot of us journalists were saying, that first season, when he was alongside Jan Vertonghen, it almost felt like such a wonderful kind of mentor-protege kind of season. And you could see just why everyone was raving about this young 21-year-old Ajax centre-back. And, Champions League had terrific games up against Ronaldo. He was so good. And then maybe it's tied in with Jan Vertonghen ageing and perhaps becoming an injuries and becoming a less kind of important part of the team. I don't know. But yeah, I think kind of Sanchez has gone in this downward trend since then. It's really sad to see. I mean, he may well argue that the few minutes he gets here and there, I think I don't think he started a game since October in the Premier League. He might argue that if you're going to chuck him in there suddenly in all these different scenarios once every, 10 games, he's never going to look sharp. He's never going to have any rhythm. And he is going to make little mistakes and things like that. And he may say, and I think he's probably fair, that when he has a run of matches, he looks better. End of last season with Romero out, Sanchez was probably one of the better players in that back line in the last few months of the season. But he doesn't help himself. He doesn't help himself in terms of his defending at times. He can look very, very clumsy. And he does. You've heard me say, even at his best, I still feel he does have one mistake a game in him, at least. And it's whether that mistake kind of leads to something. When he came on, a good example of that, I think, was soon after he'd come on. And this doesn't help that they scored pretty much within a few minutes of him coming on. Was when the ball was played across to him, he did fail. It was one of those little technical moments. And I remember Mourinho picking out his technical ability, didn't he, when he was in the final against Mourinho's Man U, and it became this big thing. But when the ball was passed to him in this move on yesterday, he just let it kind of roll under his foot and hit his other leg. And he just had this minute where he just needed to take a bit longer to then get the ball to Pedro Porro. What I would say is that I don't think that shifts the blame off of Porro for that goal. Because I still think Porro then had enough time to do something better with the ball, to clear it, whatever. He instead chose to run forward and unfortunately was suddenly surrounded by three players and lost the ball. Ball ends up going back behind him, and Matthias Venus scored. It was actually like a nice dinked finish. It was a good finish, but he was gifted the ball. So yeah, everyone noted the Sanchez kind of mess of the touch beforehand, but I think trying to say Porro was under a lot of pressure is slightly over-egging it. He definitely would have been under more pressure because they had that extra kind of split second to get upon him, but he had loads of time to still do something better with the ball than he did. But yeah, there's no excusing Sanchez for the second goal. He was turned so easily by Taverner. Absolutely. Kind of lost him behind him in the build-up to the goal. And then he kind of went, oh, you're there. And then when he turned, it's so frustrating. It's one of those where maybe on a different day you could then say, oh, he did really well to get back and get his foot on the ball. But then prodded the ball straight into the path of Solanke. And it was just, oh, God. And then Solanke actually it was almost a carbon copy of the finish for the first goal. A nice little finish over the diving Romero and Lloris's hand. And that was when it all just started to go just horribly horrible. It was just horribly horrible. So what then happened, again, if you're not aware, the Spurs fans just had enough. And how much would I say? Maybe half the stadium? I don't know if that's fair. Maybe half the stadium. It kind of felt like that at the time. Decided after the restart that every time Sanchez got the ball, was about to touch it, they were going to boo him. Again, doesn't sit right with me. I know where it comes from. I understand the frustrations. But it was like, ugh. You saw a lot of journalists immediately like, what? It was, it was so uncomfortable to watch. We've seen fans boo opposition players, ones that get a lot of stick during games. I think we've seen fans booing their own players for what they feel is a lack of effort. We saw Tanguy Ndombele, remember, when he was booed for coming off the pitch really slowly. I think you see fans boo their own players when there's a lack of respect to the club. Remember Hossam Ghali when he threw his shirt down Martin Joltar, my goodness. But this felt different. This, like I say, was no lack of effort from Sanchez at all. Emerson, wasn't he? Earlier in the season, again, he was booed by the Spurs fans when he was about to come on the pitch. But to actually see one of their own players booing them every time they touch the ball, again, what's the positive? What does that? What comes of that? What's the end game of that? And I think that's the problem. I don't think there is. I think there is just I'm angry and I'm going to let you know. But it almost turns. Maybe it becomes a bit of pantomime, but it's just the most unpleasant, awkward pantomime ever. And it is. It comes from the frustration right from the top of the club that trickles down all the way, and I understand that. But yeah. And again, Sanchez is probably one of those players that the fans look at and say, well, why is he still being used in the team? Why is he not being upgraded? I saw some people saying on Twitter earlier, he had the chance to leave and he didn't. I'm sorry, that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. Davinson Sanchez, from what I understand, for the last few summers especially, has been absolutely open to leaving because he wants regular game time. He does. But I just think no club has ever offered the sum of money that would get Spurs interested. I think maybe one of the windows that Conte actually didn't allow it as well because of the lack of numbers. So, I wouldn't put that on Sanchez. Sanchez, let's be honest, especially this summer, I think he's only got a year left on his contract this summer as well. This is not a guy that's going to be desperate. I think everyone will get their wish anyway. But yeah, to put that on Sanchez, that he was sticking around to pick up a paycheck, it's just not true. It's not true at all. And it didn't look good I saw the rival fans piling in on social media. Absolutely like, what a club, all this sort of stuff. This is how they treat one of their own players, blah, blah, blah. It was a bad look. It was a really bad look. And actually, I felt that, we were always talking about the fan base being so fragmented and split right now. I actually felt this was another one of those things that really split the fan base because I spoke to people kind of at the ground as they were coming out and I was leaving and stuff, and they were quite ashamed by it, by fans doing it. But then also, when you got half the stadium doing it, that's half. If that is the number, there was half of the fans that absolutely believed that it was the right thing to do. And social media, again, I should stress that social media is no real barometer to judge anything, because you do get a lot of people that probably don't go to games or maybe haven't been to many games. And maybe they live abroad, I don't know, who aren't able to get to games. But there's a lot of people that I would do the same. And it's like, but would you? Would you really? Or are you just saying that because you're on social media? But yeah, I did feel there was a real split on social media of the people that were ashamed by it, embarrassed by it. There were certain people that were like, very much, I don't like Davinson Sanchez. I don't rate him, whatever, but I still wouldn't boo a person in a Spurs shirt. Whereas there was other people that feel like, he's a so he's a professional player playing at the top level in football. That for them is part and parcel of the game. I don't know if it is. I don't know if it's part and parcel of the game to be booed by your own supporters who, the clue's in the word, I guess, are meant to support you. It's really difficult. And then obviously Stellini took him off. And actually, tactically, it was the right decision. It was the move that had to be made because Spurs, had to go to the back four at that point and push on. You could argue whether it should have been Danjuma or whether it should have been... Oh, no, at that point, actually, it was fine, wasn't it? It was later that Richarlison replaced Skip. But at that point, switching to the back four did make sense. It was kind of a back 4/3 with Porro on the right of a back three. It was a weird formation even then. But in that moment, Stellini took Sanchez off. He kind of validated what the booing fans were doing. Then they could say, well, we booed and he was taken off. But it wasn't that. It was a tactical decision. But just looking, because you heard me say before, the dugouts are right in front of us. And looking down and seeing Davinson Sanchez walk off that pitch to the biggest cheer ever for him being taken off. And he sat down and he just looked so... I don't know. He kept putting his... I don't want to say, there's some people saying, oh, he was emotional, he was crying. All that. I don't know if that's the case. All we saw was he's putting his hand over his face. He looked just like... He looked devastated. He looked like he wanted the ground to just swallow him up. He played 23 minutes. He'd been a substitute that had been substituted. And he just looked absolutely gutted. And look, I've seen people saying, oh, people always kind of... An instant go-to is money. Which it's like a fascinating kind of like insight into where people's minds go on that. It's like, oh, he's paid however X amount of money, he could go home and cry into all his money. I have no sympathy for him and all that. Life doesn't work like that. Otherwise, you'd get lots of very well-off people being incredibly happy. And this is not how it is. Sanchez will have gone home back to his wife. He's got a little boy. He would have been devastated. He won't be sitting there in like some big house going, whoa, like some evil megalomaniac kind of thing, being like, oh, well, I've got all of this around. It's not how it will work. He will have gone home and been absolutely distraught last night. He will have had his family kind of around him. And I guess this is the thing is, I guess Spurs fans would hope that the Spurs fans would be around them, and they weren't for him. I've never liked that whole they get paid well so they can't have their mental health affected because they earn money. It's never worked in my mind, that logic to it as well. Because, other people in other situations, I've seen people saying, like, if I was in my job and I was making mistakes and doing it wrong, I'd expect to be told off and all that. Yeah, by your boss. You don't have thousands of people booing every single thing you do. I can't even imagine what that would be like. That must be just the most horrible feeling. I don't know. I don't know. It's so difficult to process because, like I say, there's people going to be really annoyed that I'm saying that I don't agree with it. And they'll kind of, I don't know, but I understand the frustrations. I must stress I understand where it comes from, but it doesn't mean I have to say that it's of any benefit to anyone whatsoever. And it, I don't get it. I don't get it in that respect. And I've never seen anything like it in my time reporting on football at every level. I've never seen a club's fans boo their own player for making a mistake. In every, maybe in the moment, you could maybe say, boo in the moment, but then to then kind of harangue them and boo them for every subsequent touch afterwards. I've never seen that. And actually, Hugo Lloris came out afterwards and said he'd never seen it either. I think it was Carrie Brown from beIN Sports asked him afterwards about the actual kind of more the cheer and all of that. But when Sanchez went off, and he said it started earlier, as in with the boos. It was when he was on the pitch. I've never seen this in my career. I feel really bad for Davinson. He's a teammate, he's a friend, and he's been fighting for the club for many, many years now, and it's just sad. The story is sad for the club, for the fans, for the player. It's something you don't want to see in football. And Stellini was later asked about it in his press conference. He said, I understand it's a tough moment for everyone and we have to analyse this moment. Everyone needs to analyse how important it is to support the player. I take the responsibility for the decision we made. I thought it was too early in the game when Longley was injured to use one striker more because it was the first half and we were 1 up. So I didn't think it was the moment to change with a striker. After, when we were 2-1 down, I thought this was the moment. Davinson has to know it was only a tactical decision, but we need to support him because it's a tough moment for him and also for all the team. So we have to create unity in our dressing room and in between us, and we will do. And then he was asked, I can't remember who it was, or it might have been, no, I can't remember who it was, whether he would whether he would be fine about maybe having to play Davinson Sanchez, let's say against Man U in the next home game, putting him back in front of the fans again. And he said, if we need to, yes, he's a professional player. We need to go strong for the team. But I repeat, if the team pushed more when we scored the first goal, we're here to speak about a different situation. It's the mindset that needs to change. Not only Davinson, it's the whole team that can help. Every player that came onto the pitch. So yeah, look, the frustrations come from a bigger overall picture of gripes. The way the club's run, everything that's been happening with the club, especially in the last few seasons. I get that. But as an advert for any potential new signing coming to Tottenham Hotspur, it was not great. Look, I'm absolutely, because sometimes people take these massive extremes when I say things. I am not saying that the fans would be the only reason that a player or manager or whatever might think twice about coming to Tottenham. Absolutely not. I think the way the club is run sometimes will put off managers. And I also think the club being a bit of a mess might put off players, especially if they don't get into the Champions League, which is obviously it's looking more and more doubtful with performances like this. But what I would say is that when you're absolutely going for not only Davinson Sanchez, but also for a new signing that only joined 3 months ago, and this wasn't at the match, this was online, yeah. It's not the greatest advert for Tottenham Hotspur. And the sad thing is that Pedro Porro is one of the most positive people, like jovial, smiley characters you could possibly have. He's only 23 years old. He's like a really young guy. And if you looked at his social media presence, it kind of reflected that. He was a guy who was just, yeah, everything was like, come on, you Spurs, and all this, we will be better for you, and all of that. And it was like, I don't know why, it's some weird kind of Spanish-y attempt at saying English. But yeah, he was like that. He's that kind of guy. So to find himself after, look, yes, he made the mistake for the first goal. And yes, for the final winning goal for Bournemouth, it was a little bit, he can be a bit easily knocked off the board. He was in the air, I felt, in the build-up to that. But that is something that he will work on now in his first season. His first pre-season. Any player coming to the Premier League knows that they're going to have to work on their strength. And that is something that Porro's going to have to do. Of course he is. But to have made, to get the abuse he did during and after the game, that was to such a degree he felt he had to delete his Instagram and Twitter accounts. I don't know whether he had a Facebook one, but certainly all his social media accounts have gone. They've absolutely, disappeared. And, what were we? Just 3 months ago, you had everyone calling for this £40 million player. We have to have it. Announce Porro. We want Porro. Bring in Porro. And now I would hazard a guess that some of those same people were abusing him online. I wouldn't be stunned if that was the case. I'm not saying all of them, but some of them. I get why some people might say, Sanchez has been here for 6 years. How's he been here this long? We want to change, we want to upgrade, whatever. Porro's been at the club for 3 months. 3 months. And he doesn't have, there's no patience for him whatsoever as he tries to adapt to the Premier League. And so for a guy who's that positive, to want to remove any way that the fans and he can communicate back and forth with each other, it says a lot. And it's so sad. Look, I know all players. That's maybe, sadly, less of a rarity than what happened to Sanchez. Like I said, I still can't think. Other people may be able to give examples of that. I think Charlie Eccleshare in The Athletic, I think he mentioned in a bit, he wrote on the game about Aboué at Arsenal. Ironic, Aboué. And there were some quotes from him about how essentially it destroyed him. He didn't want to even, he was saying to the boss, I don't want to play. I don't want to be put through that again and stuff like that. And mentally it does affect them. So maybe that's another kind of experience to that. But it's so difficult. I'm trying to rack my brain and think of players that were booed with their every touch after making a mistake. I generally can't think of it. And that for someone that's, I've been a journalist for, it's 20 years this summer, to have not seen something like that and to have a new thing happen in a game. Yeah, it's mad. Like I say, for a club that's lurching from absolute one mishap to the next, I understand where the frustration comes from. But yeah, this was not the greatest advert for Spurs on or off the pitch. It was not good. Not good. Not good at all. We need some positives. We need some positives at this point. We're 50 minutes in. 51 minutes in. We need some positives to talk about. Sonny scored again. Nice finish. Slightest deflections, but I don't think that probably affected it too much. Bournemouth may say it did, but yeah, no, good to see him scoring again. I thought even Perisic was much improved as well, especially first half. I think he did a lot of good things. I looked up, I always have a look on who scored to see various stats and things like that. And I thought it was interesting that they had him as their man of the match who scored based on the stats. Just ahead of Son. It was him, then Son, and I think Danjuma next. So Perisic had an assist, 3 key passes, 4 dribbles, 3 shots, 3 accurate long balls, as well as the long throw that led to Spurs' second goal, for Danjuma, and the late corner that Richarlison, I have no idea how he headed that wide. It was completely unmarked. But Kane kind of did something similar. Was it in the FA Cup late on? Perisic did well. He slung us. Look at these numbers. These numbers I couldn't believe. 19 crosses Perisic put into the Bournemouth box. Porro did 13. And it's difficult to know whether the fact that only two of Perisic's 19 crosses found a Spurs man was down to a lack of quality in his ball, or the balls, or whether it was the movement of the attackers not being in the right areas. I don't know. If, for those wondering, Porro had 5 successful out of 13. But one attacker who did make his mark was Danjuma. Obviously someone we've been calling for to see that a little bit more of. Before this match, he'd had 50 minutes across 4 appearances since arriving in January. Like we said, his appearance against Brighton last week was his home debut, 2.5 months after joining the club, which is mad. He made his presence felt in that game. His pressing, his movement off the ball helped lead to Harry Kane's winning goal. Yet he found himself again on the bench. So, and that's despite Kulusevski again. I felt again yesterday. Lots of kind of intent, but just so little quality in the final third right now from a man who was so deadly in the final third, whether it was an assist or a goal. It was crazy. It was absolutely kind of crazy, kind of what's happened to him, and it's all systematic. It's all part of the systematic failures, I guess, at the club, and how so many players have gone off the boil this season. Yes, it's not good. But hey, Danjuma came on. Obviously, the cheers were not a good thing when he came on because they were mainly about Sanchez going off. But hey, he could take it as there was support for him. He was safe in the knowledge that he was actually one player that the fans were definitely behind. So that was a good thing. And he chased everything. He came on, brought a lot of energy. I remember one run back, he tracked back and made a tackle. Did really well, and that got the fans kind of going as well. Caused some problems up front as well. 2 shots on target, 1 off target, put in 1 accurate cross, 1 dribble he went on as well. And then came the goal. And we kind of all thought, yes, that's it. He's written the headlines. He's got his chance, and he's stuck one to the Italians, I guess you could say, of showing I should be playing. So if you haven't seen the goal, it was Perisic's long throw. Richarlison jumps up with a defender. He doesn't actually get to Richarlison, but the ball knocks down to Danjuma, who hits a really nice low strike, takes a nick off a defender, and goes straight inside the left-hand post. Bournemouth wanted an offside because Harry Kane was out. I don't think the ball touched him, but they were trying to claim that he was blocking Neto's view of the strike. I wouldn't entirely go away. Gary O'Neill was adamant in his interviews afterwards that it should have been struck off. I don't think so, purely because I think the ball was going so quickly, and it was so far away from Neto as well. I don't think even if he could see it, he would have had any chance of stopping that ball going into the net. Even if he had a full view of it, I don't think it would have stopped it. I don't know whether that means it still should have been caught offside or not, but I don't see how him having an entirely 100% full view of it, if he didn't, would have stopped it. But no, that's just me. And it was quite interesting watching his interview afterwards, Danjuma. He was trying to keep that balance between having a little bit of a smirky / smile because he'd scored and he was really happy to have kind of managed to do that. And it was a big goal at that time. And you saw him kind of trying to whip up the crowd when he scored, but also balancing with that the fact that they lost, and then obviously the mood was absolutely rubbish. But you could kind of tell his whole interview had that little bit of positivity that no one else was going to have in that scenario. Let's see, I've got his quotes here. The primary feeling that we have is disappointment. I think towards the end of the game we did well. We tried to win the game, and if you're Spurs, you should always try to win the game. You're inevitably going to leave some space in behind for Bournemouth on the counter, but I think I'd be more disappointed if we didn't go for the win. I like that. If you're Spurs, you should always try to win the game. I like that attitude. I think towards the end of the game, we showed character. We got the equaliser. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be today, but we can make sure that we do nothing less than go back to the drawing board, dust down, and make sure that we give our all in training again and prepare for the next game. He's a really good guy to interview. I've been told this by people that used to cover Bournemouth. For journalists, he's very good. I hope we get a decent interview with him before probably heads off in the summer. What else we got? On the last gasp winner for Bournemouth, it was a bit of a punch to the gut, to be honest. It would have been a dream to win the game again as we did away, but this is football. It's not always meant to be, and in the hard times, it's even more important to stick together, and it's even more important to get the support. We're obviously devastated with the result of the game, but nevertheless, I'm standing here very confident in my teammates, the fans, and the staff. We've got 7 games left, and it's all to play for. So as long as we focus on those games, we get our conviction back, our confidence back. There's nothing to worry about, if you ask me. So, like I say, journalists like him, especially because he can be very honest. And I felt that, because it was Milesy doing the club interview, this was another one after the Son one last week where I was almost surprised they didn't do the whole kind of trying to chop out bits of it, because like with Sonny, I felt was as honest, as close as he's ever been to kind of questioning why he's not allowed to be in the positions that are best for him to score from. I felt Danjuma was a little bit like, well, I don't know why I've been getting the chances. It was quite interesting. Here's the quotes for you. He said, he was asked about whether at least his goal personally was something to build on. He said, it's something for me to build on personally. Obviously, I've been waiting to get a chance. As disappointing as the result is for me today, for me it was also disappointing not to start or get the minutes that you're hoping for. But for me as a player, it's the same situation as we're in as a team after the game today. In football, it's the hard times. It's when it's even more important to stick together, find the character to get the motivation to work twice as hard. For me as a player, that's all I tried to do. And when I came on, obviously, I'm very happy with the goal for the club. I've been waiting to score for the club for a while now in the Premier League as well. With the result, it happens every now and again in football, but we just need to make sure we go back to the drawing board and prepare ourselves for the next game. He's a confident guy, honestly, he is. He was asked about I think Milesy asked the question in a way that he said, if we could go to Newcastle and get a result, then we could start hoping about the week, the rest of the week, and trying to get top four. And he said, I don't think we should start hoping after we win that game. I think we should start hoping now. We should make sure that we've got our confidence. Newcastle dropped some points. We've dropped some points today. Obviously, we've had a big chance today. It wasn't meant to be. So all we've got to do, we've got a full training week ahead. We need to make sure we switch each other on and we find our togetherness and make sure we bring the 3 points back home from up north. It'll be interesting to see what happens with him against Newcastle. It would seem at this point, surely Stellini has to give him a shot. If he's out there and he's scoring goals and Kulusevski isn't contributing direct involvements to goals, then it's very difficult to continue hiding Danjuma away in a corner and maybe trying to get him on to bail you out at times. He needs to be fitter, of course. You've got 39 minutes if you include the added time at the end of the game. So that's enough to start building up your fitness. It's almost a half of football. But yeah, Stellini needs to change the momentum after this week. There's going to be a lot of players low. There's got a lot of players, not in a good place. Some might say that's Tottenham. And I think in Danjuma, Stellini has one positive thing he needs to harness. I think if you've got anyone that has a bit of confidence and feels like they're not within that same mindset as the rest of the group, you've got to harness that. Use it. I think with Sonny as well. Sonny's back in goal scoring form, which is great. If that means Danjuma going on the left and Sonny on the right, where he's equally good. Sonny's so good. He can play anywhere in those front three positions. So I think, and I'm a big Kulusevski fan, but I think it is the time to give Danjuma a shot. Why not? What have you got to lose? Because at the moment, sticking with the same team game after game is not producing the results. So, yeah. Stellini, go for it, man. Go for it. Daniel Levy. I think we have to go there now because he was back at the game. I don't know whether he was at the one against Brighton, but I certainly could see on our monitors that he was up above in the director's box yesterday. The chance. Mainly coming from the big South stand. We want Levy out. They called. Then came an even louder one, which we know now we're going to get almost every match at the moment, is Mauricio Pochettino. He's magic, That one I'd say was louder and it spread around more of the ground. That's not to do down the Levy chant. It's just to say I think anyone there would have said the same about the volume and the way it spread a little bit more. Like I say, Levy up there, sitting listening to that. He's been abroad recently as well, from what I understand. But he's kind of returned to a club that's utterly just lacking in leadership and direction. Not just on the pitch, but off of it. And like I said earlier, at the top of this, the buck has to stop with him. He's the boss man. If anyone has to grab the club and take it in a certain direction, it's him. And unfortunately, the direction doesn't look great right now. It's not the direction that anyone wants to be heading in, because it's just, it kind of almost feels like they've reached a dead end right now. He's had fans calling for his exit before, in previous seasons as well, but I don't think there's ever been with the numbers within the stadium and volume. Like I said, even though I'm saying that the Pochettino chants were louder, that's not to say that these weren't loud, the Levy out chants. And I think it is going to be somewhat awkward that the stadium that is Daniel Levy's legacy, I guess, or he'll hope will be his legacy, or one part of his legacy, is actually providing bigger crowds at which to voice this frustration against him. And the acoustics of this stadium probably makes them even louder for those watching on TV at home as well. There is a certain kind of awkwardness to that. But do you know what? I think even more than Levy out chance, I think the Pochettino chance are the ones that are probably going to be more problematic for him. I think Levy's the kind of guy that, well, he certainly seems to say whenever he's been asked in the past in meetings with the Supporters Trust that, he doesn't really let supporter criticism get to him. But I think it's the Pochettino stuff. And we were talking about this afterwards. I do wonder whether, I think they're going to be the ones that make more of a dent, if anything, than the Levy out stuff. Because, look, let's be honest, if Spurs, and this is such a tough week coming up, away at Newcastle and Liverpool, Man U at home in the middle, if it's a mess of a week, as the direction of the club and the team right now looks like it could end up being, the calls for Pochettino to come in and save the club are going to just get fever pitch. They're going to get so loud. Look, I know it's not for everyone. I know there's people that really don't want Poch back, but there's no denying that within the stadium now, the match-going fans, there is a loud, would I say it's half again for that? Maybe more. Are calling for him to come back. And this is happening in repeated matches now as well. And the trouble is, with every rubbish game and Spurs not playing in a good fashion, it's only going to make those 3 really peak years under Poch in the middle look all the better as well. People are going to feel so nostalgic for those moments. They're just going to shine brighter as well. Look, we know, and his critics will say this, and we know it is the truth, that the final year under Poch was not good. It was not good at all. It's not a time that anyone thinks back will fondly remember it. There were many reasons for that, Pochettino being one of them, some of the decisions he was making, and maybe the way he was acting a little bit towards the end as well. He was a tough guy, and he was very down, I think, towards the end as well. I think the players, obviously, part of the problem as well. And of course, a big old chunk on Levy himself as well, because not least those 2 transfer windows when inexplicably the club didn't do anything. It still, for me, is one of the most bewildering things I've ever seen in football. And when the going got tough, as Billy Ocean said, the tough get going, and unfortunately, it was Pochettino had to get going, because despite the fact that one man you think would have credit in the bank, he was out. There was no backing for him then at all. But why I say these chants are problematic for Levy is because at the moment, it doesn't appear that Poch is a pressing person of interest for Tottenham right now. And if anything, he's sitting there. I mean, he did a little. I swear there's a little bit of thought in some of these Instagram things. Like he did one today just before I started this, where he's sitting on like a sun lounger. I think it said something like just chilling. It was him with you could just see his feet up, and it's like it may be entirely unconnected, but there's a part of that where if you're going to be mischievous, you're thinking that it's all going wrong at Spurs and there's Poch just chilling, waiting for the call. I don't think that's entirely true. I don't think Poch is waiting for the call. I think I'm not entirely sure he's 100% sold on the fact that now's the time to come back to Tottenham. But like I say, I don't entirely know whether the other way either, that Poch is the one that they desperately really want Spurs right now. If anything, from everything I keep hearing, is that they're trying to keep their options open until the end of the season, when they can speak to more candidates and when they can also see which coaches are going to be available as clubs make various decisions, and which positions will also be open and I guess a threat and all this sort of stuff. But the problem is the bigger and louder the clamour is for Pochettino to return, this romantic notion of him coming back to save the day, so it puts more and more pressure, I think, on Levy to make probably the one decision that will deflect away from him for a little bit. And that's always been my sense with certainly with the people around Daniel Levy. There's always this sense of protect him. And I do wonder whether we're getting to the point where kind of trying to remedy the biggest mistake he maybe made. When you look at the 4 years since, would be bringing back Pochettino. Like I say, again, I must stress, if he wants to return right now to the club in its current state, not only is it a mess, but it's a completely different club to the one he left, structure-wise and everything. Arsenal and West Ham finished 2-2. Little update there for people who will see this hours later and be fully aware of the result. But yeah, it's whether it's actually the right move for all parties right now is another thing as well. Especially if the club are forced into it. That's, on one hand, people might think, oh, that's a good thing. But on the other hand, having them have to make an appointment to appease the fans may not mean that they'll be fully into it, if you know what I mean. Because I was thinking back, the last time Daniel Levy made an appointment that was purely to appease the fan base was 22 years ago. And it was his first ever appointment as chairman when he booted out George Graham, the former Arsenal manager, to replace him with a club legend in Glenn Hoddle. And of course, there is a certain irony to the fact that Hoddle unfortunately failed at Spurs. Another man with a back three, wasn't he? He was certainly back three for England. I'm trying to remember if he was back three for Tottenham now. So long ago. But yeah, so he struggled. But actually, George Graham remains one of only 2 men to lift a trophy at the club in the last quarter of a century. And he did it before Levy took charge as well. So yeah, from what I understand, kind of digging around in the whole managerial situation this weekend, is that one of the key aspects Spurs are looking for in this search for their next manager is they want to appoint someone who sees Spurs as their first choice they want to go to and not be a fallback option if another vacancy is filled, I guess, and they think, I could look at Spurs now. Which is an interesting way to take. I get it, I understand it, and I think after maybe the Conte era where you maybe didn't always feel that, he felt particularly privileged to be at Spurs, but, with his history, I kind of get it. But, he did always feel like he was doing the club a favour. You got that sense from him. So, yeah, I guess I understand it from that point of view. But it makes it a slightly more difficult task. Whether Pochettino is one or not, or whether he is maybe holding out to see whether Ancelotti does leave Real Madrid, which, I don't know, Ancelotti's comments in recent days don't entirely suggest that. Because this is the thing, when you look at jobs that are out there, you've got Chelsea, maybe Real, if that is to be. I don't know now on that. And I do think there'll be a few Italian jobs up as well, with Napoli absolutely smashing everyone in Serie A. There's some talk that PSG might become available, although Poch doesn't obviously want to go back there, or wanted back there probably either. So yeah, so suddenly kind of saying that, it depends on who you believe. And, there may be some that think, well, Nagelsmann would want Chelsea or he'd want Real Madrid over Spurs. But I don't know. Maybe whoever then has to make a strong case if those jobs are not available for why they are genuinely excited about being at Spurs. It's such a tough thing to kind of, right now, with the club as they're at, to try and kind of make any case for why they're the most attractive option out there right now is a difficult one. I do think it's too much to say no one will want to manage Spurs or good managers will want to manage Spurs, because, look, take away the rubbish of what's happened this season and like I say, the toxic atmosphere right now at the club and all that. It is still a club that in the last, if they were to get top 4 this season, would be 6 out of the last 8 seasons they've been a top 4 club. They are a big club in a lot of ways, the infrastructure, the stadium, the training ground, whatever. They're not a big club right now, of course, in silverware or spending or anything like that. But, there will be managers that will look at that job and say, oh, yeah, especially managers have big egos as well. They'll feel that they can go in there and fix what others couldn't do. And the kudos that comes with going into a club where, Conte and Mourinho weren't able to take them to the next level and doing so. So I don't think it's the worst kind of idea in the world. I put it in my talking points this morning that went out, and I saw some aggregators ran with it, and fans were like, oh God, that's ruling out everyone. And I get it, but I don't think it really is. And I do agree to a point that you want someone who's really proud to be the Spurs manager, because you want them to connect with the fans, and you want them to instill that same belief in the players. You want, if the manager doesn't look like I've got to be here, then that's only going to translate to the players. So I get it. It's actually one of the few things that Spurs, when it comes to managers and their manager searches, I actually kind of do agree with. Yeah. And the other interesting thing that right now is happening is that, Spurs are very actively knocking down any suggestions or reports that they have a leading candidate at the moment for the job. So if you see anyone put a report out saying that this man is the number one candidate, very quickly Spurs are kind of making it very well known to any journalists that, that's not true. That's not true whatsoever right now. I think there's a desperation to prevent any repeat of the absolute farce, the 76 days in 2021, when the fans were bewildered, they were angry, they were fed up at how, after seemingly spoken to so many managers and considered so many managers, they ended up with Nuno Espirito Santo, when there was so many other candidates out there. Look, it may end up being 76 days again, purely because of the amount of time. It's naturally, it's more time towards the end of the season. So I think time-wise, it's probably not going to be too different. But you just don't be a farce. Don't be a mess. Get it right. It's all very well kind of trying to deny everything to stop yourselves looking stupid. But the best way to not look stupid is to pick the right man. That would have been much... In 2021... There was no reason after all of that to end up with your 25th choice on your list. I'm sorry. But no put that blame on the media. Oh, you reported we liked him. You reported... No. We knew you had talks with these people. This wasn't us going like, this person turned you down because they didn't want a job. It's true, they didn't want a job, these certain managers they were talking to. There were some managers who did want a job, but it didn't work for certain reasons. Like Paulo Fonseca. I think Gattuso was interested as well, but it didn't happen. So, yeah, I don't like that. I think the media can be very mischievous at the best of times, or the worst of times. I don't know which way around. But yeah, trying to pin that mess of 2021 on the media, I'm sorry, absolutely no way. So Levy's got a big decision to make in these weeks ahead, as to whether, I guess, he will be led by the fans just to get them back off his back for a while, or whether he'll continue to in the face of these chants to actually perform due diligence and make sure that they get the perfect man for the perfect situation at the perfect moment. Some people may still think that's Pochettino. It may well be. It may be someone else. We don't know, but yeah. He's got other things on the horizon as well. This is the thing. The club's such a chaotic mess right now, is that even the manager situation, and they still haven't got a women's team manager either. But even they're not the most probably depressing thing right now, is that, you've got Fabio Paratici. His appeal is going to be heard on Wednesday, and that will decide whether the original Italian Football Federation ban, 2.5 year ban that was extended by FIFA, will remain in place or not. This is all determines whether he will return to work, or pretty much he'll have to be out of work, because he can't work for 2.5 years doing anything football related. He can't be a managing director of football because he can't manage it or direct it. Even if he does win this appeal, then, like I said before, there's other investigations ongoing. The PRISM one, the UEFA one, PRISM, PRISM, I should say, in case people think I'm saying a different word. The UEFA one, I feel like there's another one as well, and I can't remember what it is. But yeah, so there's a lot. So for Levy, there's Paratici, there's Harry Kane's future. God knows what's going to happen with that right now. That's just... it's difficult to see why Harry Kane would have any real interest right now in sticking around in this complete mess, which is why the managerial appointment is so important on so many levels this summer, or before this summer, really. as well. And you've got Daniel Levy's new number 2 come in, and Chief Football Officer Scott Munn. He starts work on July the 1st when his gardening leave with the City Group finishes. It looks like, hopefully, that he's going to be out on the tour in his homeland, out in Perth in summer, and we're hoping for an interview with him. It'd be nice to speak to someone higher up at the club. Woo! Don't even get me started on that. I said, someone asked me on Twitter earlier, can't you, the journalists, ask to get an interview with Daniel Levy and these people to explain themselves? Constantly we're asking to try and get that. They don't want to do it. They just won't ever put themselves in the firing line. Perisic was meant to be the man who was going to do that, and then that's been a complete, I was going to say a bad word, complete mess is the way to put it. And the thing is, though, by the time Scott Munn arrives, pretty much all the major decisions will have been made to define what happens next at the club. Hopefully, they'll have all been taken. Otherwise, yeah, God, that would be that's even scary to think of. You know, everything is on Levy's shoulders right now. The players and Stellini can kind of do what they've got to do in these weeks ahead, but everything for me is on Daniel Levy's decision. He's got to decide whether, like I say, he listens to the fans or decide once again what's best for them. And to be honest, he's struggled on both accounts. They're terrible at listening to the fans, and he and the owners and the board are also pretty awful at deciding what's best for the fans. They really, really don't tick the boxes with either. And that pressure's just going to keep on building. It really is. He needs to pick someone that won't only just kind of make the Spurs fans happy for now, for the little kind of interim period. It needs to be someone that puts smiles on their faces for years to come. This can't be a short-term appointment. This can't be another glamour manager. It has to be someone that they genuinely think can build a legacy at Tottenham Hotspur. Because, you know, I know they drew today, and then Arsenal and then the title race is all going to be incredibly close with Man City when their game in hand, but watching them play, I don't want to always use Man City because Man City obviously are a very expensively assembled club, but I think Arsenal, and that's the saddest thing being the North London rivals. And did it become St Totteringham's Day today? I think they only needed a point. I think this, sadly, for Spurs fans, may be the day that Spurs now can't finish above Arsenal. I can actually look it up rather than just guess, because it'll be right here in front of me in the league table I always have next to me. They are 21 points ahead, and Spurs still have 8 games left. I mean, it's ridiculous anyway. Spurs are never going to catch them up anyway. Yeah, no, they still can catch them, aren't they? Oh, mathematics is not my strong point. This is why I didn't follow my father into accountancy like my daughter has, because she's much better at maths than I am. Now my voice has decided to go as well. But just pick a manager who wants to be at the club, wants to play really attractive, exciting football, and just gets everyone behind him. Honestly, I've never seen a stadium like I did with that moment with Davinson Sanchez yesterday, and it was horrible. It was horrible. Look, people have got every right to do what they want to do. I'm not criticising them. They've got every right to do what they do. I don't agree with it, but they've absolutely paid their money, and they should feel that they're able to do what they want to do and vocalise their frustrations. But I don't really want to see a stadium feel like they have to do that ever again. Spurs need to change. They need to be a much better version of what they've been this season. They need someone to believe in, whether that is, whatever level that's at. But obviously, in the meantime, now it has to be the next manager. It has to be someone people can get behind. Look, the best shield for Daniel Levy right now is to pick the right person to stand there and back them. And there's no better shield against criticism, chants, protests, whatever, than doing the right things, than listening to what people are saying, and not always assuming that they're just, it's just hot air. There's extremes that people go to, but within it, there'll be a core message that will have a lot of, truth to it. There's a lot of things that Levy and Enoch have done wrong over the years. A lot of decisions that they've made that you must surely they would have to admit they'd have done differently had they gone back and been able to make that decision again. And whether that's putting that little bit more money in, speculating to accumulate at key points over the years that have passed. So yeah, if you pick the right person, that is a major building block to getting everyone back on side. Like I say, I've said it before, unkept promises. Promise to bring good football to Spurs. Bring it back and bring it with someone that can actually build the club into something better. Because right now, it's not a great place to be around. It's really not. I don't think I've ever looked forward to a summer more than I have this one. And I love reporting on Spurs. I love my job. I really enjoy what I do. But this season has felt the biggest chore out of any season, despite the fact that they may well finish higher than they have in previous seasons or the ones before Conte arrived. But still, it will feel more of a chore. Yeah, that's it. I want to talk about something positive. So I'm going to talk about, just to finish off, if you're not aware, I sat down with Steve Jukes, Spurs kitman. Technically, his title is... it's head of kit and equipment. I can't remember what it is now. So Steve Jukesy, he's called Jukesy in the club, so I'm going to call him Jukesy, is one of the nicest men you can meet. He has been at the club since 1987. He is loved by all. Every manager, every player that's been there, everyone that works within the club absolutely adores him, and quite rightly so, because he is such a lovely guy. So, if you haven't read my piece that I wrote the other day, please do, because it's look on my Twitter feed and you'll find it. And so what happened was his dad, Charlie, 3 years ago, incredibly sad, he was only 73 years old, very keen cyclist. He went out on a ride. He was just popping up to the farm to pick up some bits and pieces for the family. Said, I'll only be half an hour or so, I'll be back. He never came home. They found him later by the side of the road with fractures to his skull, and really sadly died. I think he went into hospital on the Monday. He was airlifted by Essex and Herts air ambulance to, I think it was the Royal London Hospital, and he died on the Saturday. They turned off the life support. Look, I know I've just realised that I said to talk about something more positive. This is not the positive part. Of course it's not. Really kind of sad, rubbish thing. And Jukesy obviously struggled at first to kind of comprehend and deal with it. And I know his family had a really tough time with it as well. So what Jukesy decided to do, and this is the positive part, was put all of his energy and his grief into trying to raise money, initially, certainly, for the Essex and Hertfordshire Air Ambulance, which is it's mad to think in this day and age, but it is run entirely on charitable donations. I remember reading, it's maybe Jukesy told me, I think it's something like 750 grand a month is required to keep it running. I think that may be the number, unless I've got that wrong. It's mad that in this day and age, something that is so important, having a helicopter to be able to get into certain scenarios quickly and airlift people quickly to hospital, is something that is reliant on charity donations. So Jukesy, what he did the first year was he did a auction of all the club shirts. I think it was the 92 clubs in the Premier League and Football League, and raised a load of money. I can't remember the exact figures. I think it was something like maybe around 50 grand, something like that. I can't remember. Then last year, what he did was he did an even bigger auction with international shirts, with bits of sports memorabilia, all signed stuff. So he had Kane and Sonny, they both adore him. They gave him stuff. Every player gave him stuff. Ronaldo, Ibrahimovic. He kind of called in favours all these kitmen, like the Kitmen's network around the world, and they all gave him loads of signed stuff. It was an incredible auction. And I think he's currently now, the money he's raised, it's over £100,000. It's a lot of money he's raised. And then I was talking to him last year. We were talking about that auction, and I was doing a piece on that. And he was wondering, he was like, I'm thinking about maybe doing a football match, because without kind of boasting, I've made a lot of friends with a lot of the players over the years, so I think I could get quite a decent Spurs side out. And obviously we could maybe get them playing against celebrities. And I said, because it's quite local to me and it's a team that I used to cover in my non-league days. I know that if you're trying to raise money for the Essex and Hearts Air Ambulance, quite a good place to play the match would be Bishop Stortford Football Club, because their halfway line goes right across the Hearts and Essex border. It's actually kind of symbolic as well. I undersold it. I think I put that idea in Dukesy's head back then. I definitely think now, looking back on it, I should have maybe, if I'd known how big it was going to become, I would have maybe suggested somewhere bigger. Because what's now happening is May the 14th, this match is taking place. The Tottenham Hotspur 11 against a like an ex-pro / celebrities 11. Bishop Stortford Football Club, I think maybe they've got about 3,500 people they're allowed in. It's sold out. The first batch of tickets sold out in 24 hours. They managed to get a slightly bigger capacity. It sold out again in 24 hours. So listen to the Spurs team. And this is such a good indictment of how popular Dukesy has been over the years and to so many players. So these are his quotes. I'm going to read them out in the piece I wrote. So, Harry Redknapp is managing the Spurs team. You've got Gomez and Michel Vorm in goal. Then Ledley King, Michael Dawson, Eunice Kabul, Sebastian Bassong, Pascal Chimbonda and Stephen Kelly in defence. In midfield, you're looking at Edgar Davids, Aaron Lennon, Tom Huddleston, Sandro, Wilson Palacios and David Bentley. Then up top, it gets even better because you've got Robbie Keane, Jermaine Defoe, Dimitar Berbatov and Raphael van der Vaart. Have you ever heard of a Spurs friendly charity match lineup like that? That's incredible. It's like a combination of the Redknapp and Joel eras. It's just, it's amazing. And what he was telling me was that this one has kind of got such a buzz around the club that he's actually had other players who are kind of on the verge, not on the verge of retiring, but maybe in the latter years of their career, have already been signalling interest in playing in these matches in the future. He wants it to become this big annual thing. Even Perisic, even on Thursday, suggested to him that he wants to play in a future one. I think he's had Danny Rose, Andros Townsend, Jake Livermore. People like this have also kind of been up for it. And also, aside from the fact that is incredible Spurs, I cannot wait. I'm going to go and cover the game. I'm looking to hoover up interviews galore with so many of those players. But even on the opposition team, Yaya Toure is going to come out and play. Joe Cole's going to come out and play. Some kind of slightly like Fitzhall's playing. Charlie Daniels, who was in the Spurs Academy. Wayne Routledge played for Spurs. He's going to play. Up top, I think they've got Carlton Cole and Marlon Harewood. And then there's various celebrities playing in it. I think Jonathan Trott's playing. Anthony Costa from Blue, I know he's playing. Mark Wright, people like that. There's loads of kind of various celebs. I think Ray Winston is the manager of the opposition team. It's just going to be an incredible day. But I absolutely undersold him by suggesting Stortford. I didn't realise how many incredible players he was going to get there. And he's talking about Watford have shown an interest in hosting next year's because he thinks he's going to. And the dream for him, of course, is at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And who knows? Who knows? Could well be in the future. That could be where it ends up being an annual event at the stadium. And he was like, do I do in future years? Do I do them against the Liverpool legends, West Ham legends, stuff like that, or do I keep with the celebrity angle? And it's just like, honestly, mate, whatever you're doing, crack on because you're doing a great job. He's expecting by the end of this, with everything going in, to have made 150, maybe approaching 200 grand that he's raised for charity. He is a remarkable guy, and I think he's looking to also put out the kind of expand the charities that he's putting money towards as well. And I think he's looking for little community projects and stuff to come forward to him. So yeah, no, it's fantastic. Have a look on, like I say, on my Twitter feed. The tickets, like I say, have sold out, but there's still so many things you can put money towards. There's going to be an auction in it where all of those players I've just said are going to be part of the stuff that's being auctioned. I'm sure knowing Dukesy, you'll get stuff from other people as well, famous names, Spurs names. And there's just a Just Giving page as well. So go on my Twitter feed. You have to scroll down a little bit past the match stuff. And it's all there. There's loads of links for everything. Or if you're someone that wants to try and a local to Tottenham, Hertfordshire, Essex, that wants to try and see if your community project can get some of the money, there's an email address on there as well. So yeah, so I wanted to finish with something that was a bit more positive because, like I say, Spurs are very draining. They really are. Yeah, we'll see. Going to make the trip up to Newcastle on Sunday. Early start. I think I've got to leave about 7 to get my train up there. You never know. Newcastle have just got walloped in a game. You're either going to get a reaction from them or maybe they might be a bit brittle. But we need to know what the Longley injury is. That's not good. If ever there was a time for, I think, Davies and Emerson to be anywhere close to being fit, now would be that time. It'd be interesting to see whether they push them or not. They need some bodies back, especially at the back and down the flanks, because they're just relying on the same players too much right now. But yeah, right, I'm going to head off. Wow, I've spoken for an hour and 35 minutes. Sorry for anyone that wants briefer videos. This was not one of those, but we had a lot to unpack, didn't we? Yeah. Fingers crossed what happens next is something that we can all make us smile a little bit more and not make me look so knackered. I look absolutely shattered. Yeah, right, I'm going to head off now. Enjoy the rest of my Sunday and I hope you all do the same as well. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.